Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for one of our many virtual events. We're very excited to be hosting this one in particular. Uh, so I'm Christian. I'm one of the booksellers at Astoria Bookshop. And today we're going to be having a really great event for the anthology of AOC, The Fearless Rise and Powerful Resonance of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which is full of amazing essays focused on AOC and her impact. And we have the editor, Lynda Lopez, and one of the contributors, Carmen Rita Wong, with us today. And before we begin, I'm going to introduce them both, and then we'll get into some questions. So Lynda Lopez is an Emmy award-winning journalist who has anchored and reported for ABC News, WCBS TV, and News Radio 880. Prior to joining 880, Lynda anchored for Fox 5 and Line 9 in New York, but was a correspondent on VH1. She was the mistress of ceremonies for the 100 Hispanic Women's Organization Gala and for the Orphan Starfish Foundation annual fundraising galas. She's a former columnist for Latina magazine and contributors to Glamour and Belleza. Her parents are very much ashamed of me right now. Latina. Lopez lives in New York City. And Carmen Rita Wong is a writer, speaker, and as CEO of Malcon Productions, an investor and advisor to women-owned businesses and productions, a former national television host, magazine advice columnist, and faculty professor at New York University. Carmen has also been a contributor to NBC, MSNBC, CNN, CBS, and ABC, and has written for the New York Times and O Magazine. She serves on the board of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America and the MOF, hosts a podcast, has published 2 novels, and is currently working on her 5th book, a memoir. Well, thank you both for joining us today. We're really excited to celebrate this book. And so I guess we can just go into questions if you guys don't mind. So for both of you, what inspired you to work on this book?
Well, for me, it's, this was something that I wanted to do. This was a book I wanted to put in the world because I felt that all of the conversation around Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez very quickly sort of boiled down into this basic conversation about, of politics and like partisanship, of like, do you demonize her, or do her critics just go at her really hard, or, does she have like her admirers? And to me, that whole conversation was missing the point of why she was impactful and why she was resonant to so many different communities, not just women, but young people of color. And that resonance, we've noticed now in our national conversation, now that we're having a bigger national conversation about race and racial justice and communities who aren't heard, we're noticing that that part of the conversation is much more important. And that was what I wanted to highlight. And that's why I picked so many of the women, like the amazing women, mostly women of color, to be part of this book.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm part of it because of the wonderful Lynda. Her helming it was very, very important to me. But in terms of the topic of AOC, listen, she's so substantial, right? I mean, she's affected so much. She's so young, incredibly smart. And what happened is that with everything that she's accomplished, I've been watching her from the beginning, and I was experiencing this crazy deja vu. Because anytime she would talk about economics or finance or money or anything, she was constantly met with this, you're stupid, or you don't know what you're talking about. It was that which had happened to me 10, 12 years prior when I had my show. When you get on a public stage and you're a brown woman, right? And you're Latina and you wear lipstick and hoops, you're really met with so much vitriol, and so you're not given the benefit of the doubt. You know what you're talking about, and it even happened to her last week when 45 was like, she doesn't know economics, these children know more, and the woman's degree is in economics. So that erasure of us as full-fledged, really intelligent human beings, so it can infuriate you, but you should know that it's there. And I love that she matches it with whatever, you're dumb. No, she doesn't. She's like, I got this. But I love seeing her because the more we see women like her, that we see women of color going out there and breaking down all these barriers, like part of what happened today, right? With VP pick, is that many, many more will go forth and do the same. So I find her very, very inspiring, and I hope we'll never experience that deja vu again.
It's true. Yeah. I think it's important to point out, or to allow us to continue to have the conversation, that many of us did not have leaders, elected leaders or political leaders who looked like us when we were coming up. There's so few people who look like you or feel like you in that arena, that to just acknowledge what it takes to fight that fight and break through and win that fight and get into the halls of power, I think is so meaningful to so many different communities, that it was a conversation that was getting pushed aside either intentionally or unintentionally, when the importance of it should have been acknowledged.
Yeah, no, I mean, the book itself is really amazing, and like just seeing like the amount of like contributors and like the various topics that they cover, even like as a Latino, like it's very inspiring to see like just the wealth of like knowledge that everyone brings to the table with each of their contributions. So for Lynda, like why did you pick these contributors? Like what was like the process for you to like boil down who you want? Lynda, sorry.
Yeah, for sure.
So what was the process for you to figure out who to include?
For me, I didn't want this to be like a straight biography of her and people just telling the stories of her lives, sort of factually. And I didn't want to assemble like a group of fans, people who were just going to talk about how much they love her, and that was the end of the story. I knew there were so many powerful and strong Latina voices out there, women's voices, like I said, voices of women of color, even though we do have a couple of amazing men in this book who contribute great, great chapters. But I knew that there were so many people whose voices don't get put together collectively like this and elevated. I really wanted to do that. All of these women, like I said, if you're looking for a biography, it's not exactly that. I wanted to talk about something that was more important and more timely. So all of these women talk about their experience, whether it's in their life personally or what they had to struggle through in their career and their career path and getting to the places that they wanted to go. And it's, in a way, seeing her impact, AOC's impact in real time when you hear them talk about their experiences or put voice to the bigger themes that you can see are important in her rise. Yeah. So, I love that there are so many contributors, like Carmen. They're not necessarily all about her policies. They're not championing, I'll say that word right one day, every policy that she puts forward or stands for. But they understand that the acknowledgement of the voice needs to happen first. Yeah. So, Carmen was a no-brainer. She's one of the voices. No, I mean, we loved her piece, as a real anchor in this book, because to draw the straight line, even where there aren't similarities, exactly to how we see AOC being received publicly, what negativity she's dealing with, and the criticism that gets thrown at her, and how much her detractors attack. Yeah. To know what that is in real life and see someone rise anyway, I know that's what created all these strong, powerful female Latina voices, and that they needed to tell that story and make sure that narrative was being heard.
Yeah, and to your point about that and about her story and what she represents, Kristen, part of the reason why she is so powerful and comes across as so powerful is because what she's going through and the response that she gets happens to thousands, hundreds of thousands of women all the time, whether she's angry, she's dumb, she's this, all these labels. This happens, these horrible things that people say to her in front of other people. Like, this happens to women constantly. And we are thankfully at a time, I'm hoping, where we're having these big conversations about what is the narrative that we have around women and women with power and women of power? What are we saying in the media that you know, propagates the idea that, you know, women have to act a certain way or be a certain way or have to be talked about? I mean, I think one of the biggest papers in the country last week said the VP pick was something like The Bachelorette. I mean, what world are we living? This stuff has to stop. So she represents.
Come on with your metaphors, man.
But she represents so many women that the what she gets thrown back at her happens to women constantly. Not every woman is able to have a platform or the power to fight back, to speak back. And I think that's why she has resonated so much, regardless whether you agree with everything that she agrees with or not. It's like, that's what she shows, is that look at how she responds and that she doesn't let that stop her. So I think it's very inspiring.
Yeah, I think to that point, it's so important because, you know, when you see what happens to her just in recent weeks, she got stopped by a fellow congressperson who had some pretty vulgar things to say about her after their exchange. And I think that we've been used to this sort of norm, especially in politics with elected political women, that they are expected to rise above it. They are expected to stay silent. They're expected to be the bigger person. You rise above that, any really awful negativity that gets thrown at you. And you show that you're more poised, you know, than getting
nice
and dealing with that. And she is someone who stands there and says, no, I will engage. Mm-hmm. She said with this last incident that it took her a day to think about it, but she realized she wanted to stand up and talk about not some particular policy or not some, you know, party belief. She wanted to talk about how you need to respect women as people, like a person as a person. And that if we are at this point in 2020 and you haven't received that message yet, then she's going to stand up and make sure that that message gets spoken, because too many women and too many young people and too many young girls are listening to let her not stand up and say, I'm going to show you that you demand to be treated with respect. So that was another reason I was happy to have this book out in the world, because again, it was about bigger themes. You know, we examine in there, what are some of the things that, you know, attract this vitriol that comes her way. And we asked each one of the women to sort of speak to why they think that is. So that's what comes out.
Yeah. And I mean, I know like her impact in general has like kind of made waves across the board. And like so many people looked up to her across like country for many different reasons. And I know both of you touched upon this a little bit already, but my next question was going to be, since like AOC is such a new figure in both Congress and the public eye, like how has she made an impact already? Like, I know you kind of both touched on it already, but like if you wanted to go into it more or just.
You first, Carmen, go ahead.
Me first. Oh my goodness. Listen, she's made a tremendous impact. You know, she has roles of power. She actually, you know, she came on board and instantly got into positions of power to make change. Now, that also meant that, of course, we're met by the opposite force, or she's met by the opposite force. But what she's doing and setting forth as an example, and let's see what happens election-wise, can put her, I mean, a lot of people have said this already, and it's not gonna be any surprise, whether you agree or not, people talk about her as running for president in the next couple cycles and being the first Latina president. How someone can go from, you know, going from being that bartender, who, by the way, has like a MIT award named after her. Let's not, you know, to get from that to being spoken about as a president, which we haven't seen since Obama, someone so young and so fresh to the table. She has made incredible strides in that way. And also, when you see her grilling people like Jamie Dimon, like the head of a bank, right? Billionaires like, you know, Zuckerberg, and making them sweat, there is, you know, I would say no better satisfaction in some ways. And it's a lot of satisfaction, but it's beyond that. We have not seen that And I know Lynda and I both have daughters who are teenagers, and I can tell you
almost for me, thank God.
That's right. Mine already made it to 13, but I can tell you the impact that that has on a whole generation. And I would say too, even on older generations like myself, a really huge impact in that way. And to see that there is a path from, I want to run for office. So many women running for office now, they see that, they see it as a possibility. It's no longer just this crazy dream. Well, I'm just a bartender. She did it. And she's making power doing it. So I don't think we can quantify it completely yet.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I would say too, that her impact is that she is exactly herself. So she ran for office as exactly herself. I'm a girl who's Puerto Rican. This is where I was born. This is where I'm from. These are the communities I know, and I don't really believe anybody's fighting for them. And so I don't think you see that kind of straightforward acknowledgement of, the fight that a politician wants to fight when they're running for office like that. I mean, she represents a really new, young, passionate type of leadership. And I think that resonates with so many, not just young people, but as Carmen was saying, maybe slightly older like ourselves, but also, women and other communities of color, and just anyone who comes from a community where that people lack. And there are forces that could be in place to help them do better, but it would take the will. And so she's saying you can be exactly who you are, exactly where you're from, and take that knowledge and go fight for what you think is right.
And she teamed up with a bunch of other young women, which is something that we all need to see more of. Women supporting women, which I know has become this like quasi cliche, but it's so necessary. It is so necessary because I came up through a time when it was like there could be only one. Any department could only hire one woman, one person of color. That was it. So it pitted us against each other. She's sitting there and saying, I'm going to sit here with which now sounds really corny, but squad, and we're going to all team up together and be powerful together. That's huge that she did that. Absolutely huge. And also to your point, Lynda, about her being real, she really is, her identity is her identity, and it's her identity to define. And that's another thing, is that when you're coming up in the business and you got like an interesting name like this one here, or something like that, and people can't peg you, or they just want to peg you right away. She's just like, no, there were many people who just said, oh, she's just some stupid bar. She said, no, this is who I am. Okay. And I am proud of who I am. And I'm Puerto Rican from the Bronx, and I wear hoops and I wear lips. She owned it. And that owning her own identity and defining it is part of a generation, but she really did it on a huge public platform.
And I think a few women in the book talk about this, but a lot of us, didn't realize as we were coming up, or when we, were her age just before she ran, that we didn't always take the opportunity to stand in our power. We didn't know half the time that we could. You know what I mean? This is, going back a few years. And I know that there are a lot of younger women, her age and younger, who don't have that same issue. But so many of us didn't know that when you were the only person in the room who was a Latina, or where you were the only person in the room who was like you and no one else was, that standing in your power and pushing back with no wasn't something that you could successfully do. And I think that she shows that with such resolve, that it's another thing that makes her almost transformative. It's so strange to say that in 2020 and in this day and age, but makes her something that is inspiring to people because you haven't seen it in big ways before.
No, I agree. I definitely think ever since she came in and kind of just broke everything apart, because she brought so much change with her coming in and just showing strength in numbers with other women, just kind of questioning authority to people huge tech billionaires and all of these people who no one ever really questioned before. And she was just straight up I'm gonna go really hard against you and like really make you like answer for what you're doing. And so I think it is transformative. And I think that like that whole impact is so like Carmen said, is still like very early on, and we're only at the very beginning of it. So like there's much more to see.
Yeah, it's true. I think about one of the chapters in the book, a really beautiful chapter that was written by Natalia Sylvester. She talks about one of the themes is that her Spanish is terrible. You know, when you're born in the US, but your parents speak Spanish, but you don't, your Spanish somehow turns out terrible. And you sort of go through your life with this embarrassment of what you can and can't do when communicating that way. And she talks about how, you know, like many of us, she grew up watching her other people speak terrible Spanglish like herself. And all of a sudden she turns on TV and there's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez not speaking this perfect, beautiful Spanish, but, you know, on the Spanish TV channels doing that horrible Spanglish that we all try to struggle through. And she describes a moment where she's in the middle of a sentence during an interview and stops. And it's that familiar feeling we all have because we got to a word in the sentence that we're not sure we know in Spanish. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So she just struggles through it and says, this is the level where I am. I'm going to try to communicate with you anyway. And then she will tweet or take to social media about, you know, it's my first gen Spanish game, you know, forgive me till I get it up a little bit. And that kind of relatability, I think, is not just, you know, something that you can dismiss as small. It's something that's much more impactful and, you know, it's beautiful in that way. And then again, you know, not to continue like just, you know, tooting the horn of some of these women, but Rebecca Traister also wrote a really amazing chapter on just being a woman and going up against these men in Congress. And we didn't even realize when we were putting the book together that AOC was going to have this incident a few weeks ago with one of her fellow congressmen. And we tried to examine in the book, Rebecca's chapter is called The Imagined Threat of a Woman Who Governs Like a Man. And so are the attacks coming at her, even from her fellow congressmen, because she is able to wield power? And if she is, then why is that scary, either to opponents or to, you know, anyone who's not like her? So
it's funny.
They scared.
It's funny that you mentioned Natalia because we're actually having her for an event tomorrow.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, so
yay!
A huge fan of her. So
she's amazing.
Yeah.
And her chapter also, you know, one of the things I love about this book is that you may not relate to the experience of every single woman in the book, but there is something that everyone will relate to. She speaks so beautifully at the end of her chapter about watching a congressional hearing, because yes, we are all those women who watch congressional hearings in our free time, where she was questioning an immigrant woman who had come to the border and who was, you know, was separated from her child. And she notes that AOC was the only woman who said any phrases to her in Spanish. So the woman was sitting there testifying before Congress about her experience at the border. And when AOC started speaking to her in her broken, not perfect Spanish, the woman began responding to her. And for Natalia, it was something that was so emotional, it almost brought tears to her eyes, because she never thought she'd see in what is essentially the biggest halls of power in our country, where someone who was a Latina was going to relate to another Latina who was a mother and get her to speak her truth.
Yeah.
And that anyone who could understand that would understand the impact of it. And so just, you know, just how beautifully she puts that together, I thought was, you know, that gave us chills.
So kind of segueing to a different subject, but so relatable for Lynda. So you grew up in the Bronx. I also grew up in the Bronx.
Yes.
So growing up there in the same place as AOC did, like, how did it influence your decision to do this book? Like, was it like one of the main reasons? Was it like a driving force for it?
You know, I think I talk about this a little in the book, but when I first heard of her and of her run in the primary, like not even winning, you know, her congressional primary yet in the Bronx, I was fascinated by her from the first minute that I heard of her, and I was trying to figure out, why am I so fascinated by her? And it was something about the fact that she felt so familiar, and I could see sort of the fight she was trying to win and the path she was trying to go down. And she knew it might not be successful for her, but it was worth fighting. There was just something about the entire spirit of what she was bringing to that race that felt super familiar to me. And I thought to myself, oh, I know that. And I recognize that. What is it that I recognize about that? And I wanted to examine that with the other women in this book. So I think there was just something about, you know, like, again, it didn't have to do with her politics. It didn't have to do, you know, what she was fighting for, but the fact that she was trying to fight a good fight. And that a lot of us know through experience in the world, that doesn't always get you very far. And I thought it was worth examining, not only that she wanted to do that, she was clear about that from the beginning, and then she did it. She won her battle, her election. And then she instantly became so nationally known and nationally impactful. It was worth sort of looking into why.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When she first started to like campaign for the Bronx and Queens, it was so like, because it was even then was still national. It was just like it was comforting to see somebody who was from this, like the Bronx, like me, be such a huge figure and like really fighting for people comparatively to like others who are, they say that they're fighting for people, but they're fighting for something else. And it's just, it was very much like, I know this sort of person and I want them to win.
Right. And more than even just knowing them, knowing that the place that they come from is not suited to shoring them up for that fight or that battle or all the forces like Carmen talks about that you're going to meet along the way that you don't even know are coming yet, that are going to be the roadblocks to you getting to where you want to go. And so just for her to know, like, I will take these on as I go, despite the fact that I did not have, you know, either the privilege or the preparation that gets me there, you know, was something else that I found that I realized made her impactful and resonant too.
I love the quality that she didn't get the script that she was supposed to act a certain way or be a certain way, or couldn't respond on social media, or, you know, couldn't talk, stand up for herself. She never got that script.
Right.
Which is brilliant. I need more women to just not get that script. And it just, she didn't ask for permissions. There were no permissions asked. That ability of her to do that, I'm sure had so much to do with where she's from. I'm a native New Yorker, not the BX Harlem, but anyway, but where she came from and how she was raised too. And I think the more that we can help young women and raise women to really not feel that they need to fit. Lynda, you mentioned this whole, like, you know, this nice thing and polite thing and all that stuff. The joke I make is that my mother raised me an entitled white guy. And it's clear that that was AOC too. Like, nobody said to her that you need to act that way. Nobody said you have to be polite. I play the game on a level field. And so did she. And she really went up there. One of the things I really love about her too is that when she first came out of the gate, I realized, like, you know, for her, this is not about ego.
Right.
It's hard with politicians, you know. You gotta be careful, you know, there's a lot of ego involved. She wasn't coming from a place of ego. She was a completely value-driven person. Even if it's not always in the right direction that you want it, you're talking about someone who you know is on fire inside in the right way. And it's not about her winning because she makes her feel good or anything. Like, she really is there for the fight, and it's incredible. And that feels very BX to me.
It's very BX. You know, it's so funny. I just very, very recently interviewed James Clyburn, the congressman who's the House Majority Whip. And I interviewed him about the passing of John Lewis. And he said the thing that he loved about John Lewis, sort of in his position as House Majority Whip, you know, he's got to get the votes. He's got to get everyone in the party on board with whatever he wants them to do. He was like, I never had to whip John Lewis because he wasn't going to be on board with what I wanted to do. I already knew his principles. I already knew his stance from day one that he came to Congress to 20, 30 years later. What was his stance on an issue? That's what it was. He didn't waver. And I think that kind of leadership is exactly what Carmen is talking about. Like, you don't ask permission. You do what you do what you believe, and people know who you are and know the fight that you're going to fight because of it. And I actually found that interesting too about not asking permission, Carmen, because I think about the VP pick being announced today, and we know it's going to be Kamala Harris. I thought it was so interesting that just a week or two ago, there was a story circulating about her in the national media about how someone on Joe Biden's team who was helping pick the VP, who was helping with the VP pick,
right,
mentioned that he didn't think he wanted Kamala for vice president, because when they had asked her a question about, you went at Joe Biden really hard in the debates, you had a lot to criticize him about, and you had a lot to, to fight back with him over, what do you say about that? And she was like, that's politics. That's how you fight this fight.
Politics. No apologies.
The person who asked the question didn't like that answer. Thought that it disqualified her from being a pick for VP. He was like not okay with the fact that that was her answer. And so it was interesting to think about, like Rebecca writes about, and like some of the other women write about, would that answer have been received by that person in the same way if she were not a woman, or she were not a woman of color?
Right.
The fact that she was saying, that's what you do in this fight. I'm doing it as anyone else who would be expected to, do this job to win. So she wasn't apologetic. She didn't come hat in hand. She didn't say, can I please have permission to be here? She was like, no, I'm doing this. And it was enough that it somehow got circulated as a national story that one person, at least on his team, didn't think she should be the pick.
I love that story. I loved it because it's really helpful in politics to, as voters, if you sit there and you think and filter every news story, everything that comes at you when it comes to women candidates with the thread of turn it into a man. What's your reaction? Because if your reaction's different, then it's gender, right? Which should not be the issue. So the fact that she came out, I was like, amen, woman, just don't apologize. That is how it's done. And that's how the guys do it. And a man wouldn't apologize. So yes, it's the same with AOC. It's the same.
Yeah, the respectability politics are out the window at this point. It's just, you have to fight for what you want.
I mean, listen, we love respect, but
yeah.
I think the days of following that script of women being thoughtful and apologetic and all that stuff, we don't need to play a different game.
And I think we haven't had until now such a powerful symbol who has actually been elected to Congress who can tell us that story or lay that out. So,
and use social media, Lynda, because that's the thing. Like, I don't even write about this, but the key here is her election coinciding with how social media has been responding.
Right.
Politics. Like, part of the reason why I think many of the women who were so powerful even before were not able to have such a big stage or to be heard in the way that we wanted. Everything got filtered through media. She's able to just go straight to the public. That's huge. Huge.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, Mariana Atencio, who's the former MSNBC contributor, writes really eloquently about that in her chapter, about how the social media skills are something that you cannot underestimate anymore. One of the reasons that she got a leg up on so many other people and was giving, Twitter lessons when she first got elected to Congress is because she understands that we live in a world where you can't not engage anymore on those platforms.
Yeah.
Like your communication with the people that you want to reach has to be active. And she happens to be very prolific and very good at it.
Very.
She she recently wanted to pass something for the Army, I believe, where it's like they appeal to, because the Army appeals to children on gaming streaming websites,
Yeah.
She wanted that banned. Like she thought that was like not appropriate, which it isn't, because and she had to explain the idea of Twitch.
Oh yeah.
To the congressman, and like the fact that like she was like willing to sit down and be like, this is what this platform is, and like why it's so harmful. That, you know,
or even explain gaming to them, like what every kid is doing right now. I'll tell you, my daughter, who is about to turn 12, only knows about her, you know, because of mommy's book, but also because she is on Animal Crossing. AOC is someone who talks to her social media followers about the, you know, even the different silly things that she's doing, you know, when she's like on Instagram Live, like cooking her rice and beans, but all of the things about her life that are sort of normal, she shares, but she also is engaged in things as a young person. So all of those things that, like you said, she's having to explain to other people what that is. She's trying to be there in an authentic place, actually making sure she knows about it herself.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it kind of goes into my next question, but before I ask, if anybody watching has any questions for Lynda or Carmen, you can put them in the comments and we'll try to get to them at the end. And so my next question is actually for both of you. So since she has such an impact on so many people, but especially Latinas, like outside of like government, like do you see things changing for Latinas who are looking to work in areas where there are so few Latinas, such as like finance or other like spheres of like work? Do you think she even has like she has an impact and like is causing change in those areas as well?
You go first, Carmen.
Yeah, well, you mentioned finance. I think, you know, normalizing the image, and it's that kind of gauche. It's like literally just normalizing the vision of seeing a young woman of color speaking incredibly well and great and smart and everything about economics and finance and technology. All of these spaces, these very majority white male spaces, does help. It does inspire. I think it's going to coincide, frankly, with the need and necessity for those businesses to address us because we're such a big population. I don't think we can be ignored anymore. But I do think there's so far we have to go, particularly as women and women of color. There's so far to go. I write about this in the chapter of a certain large accounting firm, one of the largest in the country, you know, said that information goes through women's heads like waffles, like syrup and waffles, you know, but not with men though. I mean, this was like an actual big report that was presented. I mean,
not a joke, an actual thing.
Like, I believe that. Like,
it's so dumb, but it's like so. But that's the kind of weird tunnel silo vision that a lot of industries have, right? Like finance and accounting and technology, where it's this echo chamber of their own voices and their own point of views. So it does have to change. I think having her out there, having her questioning these leaders in finance, the multi-billionaire leader of the biggest bank in the country, and tech, of course. Yes, that makes women who are studying or want to be in there say, I can do this too, right? But I think she needs to keep going, please. Just keep at it, because we need the companies to change too. I'm hoping that the pressure, of course, at the moment that we're in right now, BLM, of course, the biggest movement that we've seen now and also for all people of color, LGBTQIA, all of this. I'm hoping the companies realize that it's good business because this is the truth of the population that we're in. I mean, look at how our country has changed. Look at how the demographics have changed. And unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of them, they'll follow the money. And if they follow the money, there'll be more women of color and there'll be more women like AOC. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think about, the only profession I know, which is news and being in a newsroom, and that, especially when I started out, there are so few of them. I mean, I was lucky to do it locally in New York, like to do local news in New York. So you did see people of color, but there was definitely sort of a dominant theme through every newsroom that I worked in. Actually was just telling the story this morning that I hadn't thought about in years, which is that in my very first TV news job here in New York, I'll never forget I did morning news, and morning news, it's like cooking segments and beauty segments. And we did a segment on natural hair, on curly hair. And nobody in my newsroom knew before that I had big curly hair. And we're like, this is not it. This is my natural hair is, really dry, curly, big. And so we did it that way for an on-air segment. And we did it early enough in the show that I went through the rest of the show, doing other news and doing other segments, looking like that. I got called into my news director's office at the end of the show, like literally walking off the set, go see this person. Okay, walked into his office and literally got told, don't ever do that to your hair again.
Oh, God. And
I remember being taken aback, like, is someone punking me? Like, is this? And he was 100% serious and explained to me that my hair had to be the way it always had been up until that point, every time that I was on air on the news show. And as a sidebar, I remember intentionally keeping it that way for the next day before I changed it.
Good job.
But you very much got the message, though they were interested in diversity and we were in a majority minority city, and that the news anchors, the reporters, the people who gather and tell the news should reflect the community. You very much got the message that there is one okay way to be. And there was something about who you naturally were that had to be changed if you wanted to be here or do this. And so I do think like we are in a more hopeful time now as far as that stuff's concerned. As Carmen was mentioning before, we didn't start doing this last year. We've been doing this for a little while. So from when we started until now, I know that it's more hopeful than we are in a moment where the nation is finally able to talk about race and racial justice issues in a way that we haven't been able to truly acknowledge before, or truly converse about openly, or put it as part of the everyday conversation. And so with that happening, I know it's happening more in newsrooms, and I feel like it is moving in a hopeful direction because of that. I know that a lot of the major national newsrooms are putting together race and diversity teams. They want to talk about the different stories that they tell and what they do sort of as their narrative and how they go forward. But I hope they also realize that really all they have to do is listen to the people that they already have there, who have been telling them about the stories that they want to tell and the kind of pieces that they believe should be elevated, within a newscast or within a news narrative. So I think we are moving in a better direction, but we can hope that lasts.
Yeah. And we'll be in a great position once we don't need to just be in the DEI, the diversity inclusion space, when it's broad news. And it has advanced, quite a bit. When I first started my show, Lynda, to your point, you better believe the iron went in my hair. Fights over wearing hoops. I wasn't allowed to wear hoops for a while. I won that. But, these things escalated. And then it ended up, I was doing Melissa Harris Perry's show, and she had natural hair. It was the first news anchor to have natural. And it was such a big deal. And I remember like, this is ridiculous. Like and it needs to be dismantled. And I think we're getting there, but I would just love if people of color, if we're just allowed to be part of the mainstream news business, we're allowed to be not just in that one space. Could you imagine the coverage? Women alone, the coverage would just change dramatically. It would be amazing.
I think so. Oh my gosh, my apologies, guys. I'm sure it was my cell phone. It's not the first time that happened to me today. I meant to turn my phone off earlier. I turned my phone off, and then of course I turned it back on. I might be without my cell phone for 5 minutes. That's unacceptable.
I can't even really say anything because it's just like you said everything that needs to be said. But for both of you, for Carmen and Lynda, so ultimately, since there's so many great like contributions to the book and like so many different like stories to tell and like ideas, like what is it that you hope people will get from this book ultimately?
You know, I really hope that, you know, some little girl or some young person walks into a library and opens this book and sees things about their own life that they realize helps them, you know, relate to the person that they're reading about, but draws the line to where they want to do very directly. Do you know what I mean? That they can start knowing inherently that there are things that feel like obstacles that they can smash right through. I love the chapter that Patricia Reynoso contributed, because her theme was that being a person who was from Washington Heights in New York City, who was Latina, her dad was undocumented, you know, he became a citizen when she was in her later teens. She lost him at the age of 23, just like AOC lost her dad. She wanted to be in the magazine business. She ended up becoming the editor-in-chief of Glam Belleza Latina, which is the Glamour magazine's, you know, version for Latinas at the time. But she didn't finish college. She only got to do 2 years of college, you know, for financial reasons. She really struggled in getting her first assistant job, you know, in a magazine. And she ended up getting to the place she wanted to go. But along the way, she was looking for other Latinas who were like her, who were walking that same path to getting to where she wanted to go. And she kind of realized, like, oh, they're not me. She's like, they come from a different place or a different class, or, you know, they like, I can't talk to them about where I'm from and what I know and how little we had when I was growing up, because it's not the same. She didn't know that people like her were supposed to succeed. And that's when she saw AOC. Like, that's what she couldn't believe, that someone finally was proudly, openly talking about to, yes, that's how little we had. Yes, that's where we came from, because she always thought it was something you had to keep secret to, you know, achieve what you wanted to achieve, accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. And so feeling like that was resonant to her, like, that's what I hope, you know, people who take from it, if they would not look at just sort of strictly partisan politics, but look at the people's lives who are being affected by her impact, I think it would just give them a lot broader view of what, you know, what they should consider you know, when they think about those issues, or what they think about as a good fight. So.
Agreed.
Yep. So Carmen, what do you think? What would you want people ultimately to get from the book?
I tell you, from the book, I'm finding such beautiful, wonderful stories in the book. I think anytime you read, I'm a big fan of memoir, I'm working on mine, but anytime you read about how other people process other people, you know, we are being kind of fed, of course, AOC is huge on social media, we hear her all the time, but sometimes it can be very lonely or alone when you feel that you say, oh, you know what? I feel like this reminds me of a time, or I don't know if other people are feeling this way. You read it and you realize, oh my God, I'm sane. I'm completely sane and I'm not alone. And I think, you know, I write about, you know, being a public figure, speaking about finance and economics and money. And I think it applies to anyone, even if you don't, you know, give a hoot about going into finance or any of that, because we all have to deal with money. And seeing her take charge of a consumer department, seeing her take charge out there, you know, this woman's in charge of her own money. So it demystifies a lot of this process or the script that says that women are not good with money and with finance. So I hope you can come away from it, you know, reading more about what she's done, reading about what I put up with too, and that what we share, so you can see, you know what, I can do this. I can do this too. She's got this, and there's so much more to come. So much more to come from her. I'm excited.
I'm also excited to see where she goes from here, because it's only up, really.
Truly.
we do have one question from Sarah Elizabeth. Are you all excited to watch AOC's upcoming speech at the DNC?
I think again, seeing her as someone who's resonant and impactful is going to be sort of encompassed in all of this. When I first heard that Joe Biden picked her to co-chair his climate panel, the group of people who were going to come up with his climate change platform and the policies that he wanted to go forward, and then he announced a few weeks ago a bolder plan than we had ever seen before from anyone else. And I realized, oh, this is this is where her direction is going, and this is, you know, where her energy is going. And I remember thinking then, oh, but I don't know that we'd see her at the Democratic National Convention. Like, she's bringing her policies, she's bringing her beliefs, she's fighting for them to happen within the Democratic platform. And I thought, and in my head, even now after working on this book and working with all these amazing women, I still thought, oh, but that's as far as it'll go. You know, she won't be someone who will get up and speak to what she believes at the Democratic National Convention or something like that. And then to hear that announcement today, when we also heard the VP pick, it was, Carmen and I were saying earlier, it's quite a news day. So it's a lot.
I tell you, Brown Girl Day. I love it. I love it. Of course I'm excited. I got the popcorn. I'm gonna have lots of popcorn. I'm just gonna be so excited and so happy to see so much representation on that stage. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And I think it's so funny that we're going to have these virtual conventions too, which is such a, you know, anyone who covers,
Stage, yes.
Like anyone who has ever covered these in their life, I can't even imagine, like, how is that going to work? Like, the definition of conventions are for hundreds of delegates to be packed on a floor, screaming and drawing energy for the person that they want to have, you know, to have elected to office. So I keep wondering, you know, what kind of energy will they generate? What will this be like? You know, how will we cover it? And I think getting the new, young, passionate leaders in there is them acknowledging, like, we feel your energy and we want you to feel it back.
Yep.
I honestly totally forgot about the virtual element. Like, I'm like so used to it at this point that I'm just like, oh yeah, it's normal. But
all of us news nerds, it's all we've been talking about. First of all, you get a little grateful that you're not going to be like running around big stadiums with a big microphone trying to chase people down, and that's your 4 days of the week. But it's also going to be interesting because that allows you to get more up close and personal.
Mm-hmm.
Candidates, other people in the party, other electeds, congressmen, other spokesperson, you know, delegates for the party. And we're not going to have that in order to be able to communicate it to everybody so they can know about different things that makes this person tick or would make them, in your view, a good person for office. So it's super interesting to see how it's going to come out.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Also
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both for joining us today and having such a great conversation. This was like really illuminating for me, and I'm sure for everyone watching right now. If you do want to buy the AOC book, you can buy it on astoriabookshop.com and read the wonderful contributions from Carmen and Lynda and everyone involved. And trust me, they're all great. So I really implore you to check it out. And have a great night.
Thank you,
Christian.
Thank you.
Of course.